Hi, everybody. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Great to have you with me today. Kind of fun. Last night I went to Jimmy Kimmel Live. Just a tidbit out of nowhere. Just that was fun, kind of, to get away from the newspapers and the incredible news. We've seen the IPCC report come out this week, basically saying that yes, in addition to all the many other hands on deck, we will need to switch over to a plant-based diet if we are ever to realistically keep climate change below 2 degrees Celsius. Pretty much the report says you can kiss 1.5 degrees Celsius goodbye. That's very upsetting news. So it's been a very strange week to even hear that some articles broke about perhaps the meat industry trying to influence the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, to get a plant-based diet excluded from the report. Ultimately, I do this podcast and we better the world by sharing information. Disappointing to think that maybe there are forces out there trying to keep information from the consumer so that they can have a healthier planet and a healthier lifestyle. Oh, but wait a minute. That's what we're talking about today, is a healthier lifestyle. I usually don't speak to authors here. It's primarily the classic CEO thought leader in the plant-based business world. But today I wanted to shake things up and bring on a cookbook author, but also really an influencer so that she can talk to us about the business plan of being an influencer. So with health in mind, I bring on today's guest, author of 4 cookbooks, Toni Okamoto. Thanks for being with me, Toni.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today. I love everything that you do. I'm a big fan, so I appreciate being able to have this opportunity.
Well, the love is mutual because I'm also a big fan. Let me just tell people briefly, if they don't know about Toni, that's just crazy. So, of course, you would go to Instagram, Plant-Based on a Budget, because her breakthrough book, the original, the OG, was Plant-Based on a Budget. Now she's come out with her 4th book, which is Plant-Based on a Budget, quick and easy. So we're going to get into all this, but just in case you thought that recipes was her only gig, she also has a website, plantbasedonabudget.com. She's a blogger. She has a podcast. Here's a little tongue twister for you, Plant Powered People podcast. But today we're talking about the book. So Toni, maybe before we dive into you as an influencer, how you gained this enormous following. I think you have almost 600,000 people on Instagram and growing, and over 100,000 people on your newsletter. Yes, everybody, you should get the newsletter, plantbasedonabudget.com. Oh, and while you're signing up for newsletters, you can go to VegTechInvest.com. But okay, so that kind of grew, and we'll talk about how that structure came to be. But maybe you can first tell me, how did you fall into a plant-based diet, you personally?
I first started for health reasons, and it was very slow and gradual in the beginning. I first heard of it through my coach at track practice. I was feeling sick to my stomach all the time, and he didn't suggest that I go plant-based, but he suggested I eat more plants, and also that I limited, if not completely removed, my red meat consumption and as much fast food and processed food. And I immediately began to feel better. I started healing faster, thriving as an athlete, and it was the genesis of it all. I didn't realize at the time, and neither did my parents, who thought I was the biggest hippy dippy for not eating red meat, that it would take over my life and become this huge passion. And later, when I moved out, it became easier. I became vegetarian when I was 18. When I was vegan, I was about 20 years old, and that was through a community college veg club. And from there, it's been my passion. I've been fortunate to work in this space full time nearly the past 16 years. And I pinch myself on a daily basis that I get to do this work.
Yeah. Gosh, I love this story. It's so wonderful. It's funny. I came to being plant-based in the same way. It was through, although I wasn't an athlete, but my nephew was an athlete. And I had been trying to figure out, like, I knew in the back of my head about animals. Maybe I'll just quickly tell everyone. So I'd been trying to find a way to go plant-based my whole life. Like, it's my earliest memory, and when I was 5, 6, is that I couldn't chew meat. And I didn't know why. I certainly didn't know anything about factory farms, but I just, like, something wasn't right. Of course, my parents, who love me, I love them back, they were like, oh my God, God, our kid's going to die, no protein. So they were a strict household, and they punished me pretty severely. You know, they said, you cannot leave the table until you finish. And I would be there for hours because I wasn't kidding. Meanwhile, the family would be having fun without me. They'd be watching television without me. And it really didn't feel good, you know? And so I started hiding meat all over the place, like in my pants pockets, underneath the table, like foot of the table, and then underneath the radiator. And then ultimately they found me for lying, and then they really punished me. So I'll just quick fast forward. I kept in this idea in my head that you have to eat meat. There's no choice about it. And whenever I brought it up to my friends, like once I knew about factory farming, they sort of, I think I'll call it bullying in today's terms. You know, they sort of, oh, you're a tree hugger, and you know. And I thought, this is weird. Adults know, and they're willing to do the wrong thing anyway. So is that what it means to be an adult? Is that you have information and you completely disregard it? Like, I just was having so much trouble. Then my nephew went to the University of Oregon, and he played Division I football on the Division I football team. And the athletic coach said, if you're going to be on my team, no meat, no dairy. And I was like, flip it.
Oh,
I knew
wow.
it. I knew it all along. I've known it since 5 years old. And I'd let people talk me out of it. And I was waiting for that professional to give me, you know, that adult figure to give me permission. I was vegan mid-sentence. I was so mad.
That is incredible. The whole thing, but especially that the coach suggested no meat, no dairy. That is really counter to what I've heard of football coaches. A lot of football
Ah.
coaches suggest high protein meat-based protein diets.
Well, isn't it, and I'm not a football aficionado, but Tom Brady, plant-based, it's what helped him get through football. I mean, we're going off on a tangent. I do want to come back to your book because I want to promote your book. It's so you know, knowledgeable for people to do this stuff fast and easy on a budget. But Tom Brady, I think, went into a career like long past his 40s or into his 40s as a football quarterback. That never happens. He attributes that to his plant-based diet. And Gronkowski, and I know I've interviewed some people for the Chicago Bears who've gone plant-based.
Amazing.
So in the athletic community, it seems to be catching on, of course, with the help of things like the Game Changers, et cetera. But so your first entrance into this was through a coach helping you out. And then, of course, once you feel better, you don't need people to tell you anymore.
That is so true. That's so true. I had a lot of people in my family also suffering some pretty severe consequences of poor diet. And I'm talking about amputations from type 2 diabetes. And my grandpa died of complications in a triple bypass surgery. And it was really
Oh,
rough. And I wanted to share that with my community. And it's actually how Plant-Based on a Budget started, because often a huge concern that I'd hear when I would promote plant-based eating was the cost and access.
mhm.
And I knew I had to do something.
Yeah. I love that you say this, and I love that you sort of took it into your own hands. I think that's just, before we even talk about business and writing a book, that's such a powerful step to say, like, here's something I can do, and I'm going to do it. And then from there, the rest kind of unfolds. It's, yeah, amazing what you say. I just want to give people a little background pickup on type 2 diabetes. Why would a diet heavy in meat lead to diabetes? People usually think diabetes being sugar in the bloodstream. It's because the saturated fat that comes from eating red meat basically starts to line your cells. And so your cells, which are supposed to do the job of filtering out that sugar, getting it in the bloodstream and letting it go out through the system, can't do its job as a filter because it's clogged. So that's when the blood remains in the bloodstream and you have high blood sugar because the cells weren't able to filter it out of the bloodstream and take it away. So when those cells are clogged with saturated fat coming from animal proteins, then you have this problem, which is why we call diabetes, type 2 diabetes, we call it a lifestyle disease. Usually you used to only see it happening in adults with a long history of bad eating, but now you're seeing it in kids. It's just really so sad. A last little tidbit there, I'll say, in 2019, American diets or 285 pounds of meat a year on average. Now, I'm not eating meat. I mean, someone else is out there eating like 350 pounds of meat a year. That was 2019. So here in 2023, it's going to be a lot more. All right. So you get yourself going on putting together a plant-based on a budget and just kind of helping people with the knowledge that you had. You wanted to share it. But was there a little bit of luck or fairy dust involved? Because it took off. So tell me about that.
There's a lot of hard work and consistency over a very long period of time. I have had plant-based on a budget now for 11 years. It's hard to
Wow.
believe that it's been such a big part of my life, but for me, it's been rather slow and gradual, like
Mm,
most things. And I
yeah.
had one big breakthrough, and that was uh, when Netflix took on What the Health. I'm in What the
Ah,
Health, and it really transformed my life and brought a lot of people to plantbasedonabudget.com. And it was because of the practical application of plant-based eating. There was a lot of heavy information. And then this little tiny 2 minutes where I'm also like, also, you could do this on a budget, and you could do it at places like Walmart and Winco. And because of that 2 minutes, my life was changed.
really? So
Mhm.
you, Kip Anderson, director of What the Health, one of my very favorite movies, although for a very different reason. What the Health gave me tidbits like chicken is one of the highest sodium foods in at your disposal because they inject saline. I didn't know that one to keep it plump because the chickens are so, ill and sick that they plump it up with saline. So I didn't know that. People often think like, oh, meat is natural and it has no additives. Oh my word, people think again because it's got hormones, antibiotics, pumped in saline. But and then I also think of the lobbyist angle that I learned from What the Health. I'm going off on a tangent, but that's excellent to see that Kip decided to pick you up. Did you know him before you were in the movie, or did he reach out to you? Like, did he find you?
I knew them. I knew them both, Kip and Keegan, from my work at Animal Place Sanctuary, and then I
Oh,
went on to be a big fan of Cowspiracy, which is the movie that came right before. And I was part of their Kickstarter and got to become friends with them, and it was quite an honor to be featured in What the Health. And it was so interesting how it happened because it was a small project when they approached me, and it must have been in 2013 or 2014. And I filmed with them. We did our thing. Then in 2017,
yeah.
so
Didn't come
many years
out for a
later,
while. Yeah.
yes, so many years later, it came out and changed my life. I had forgotten that I did this thing with them many years ago. And all this time later, it came out and really made a splash.
That's so awesome. Kip, of course, having done so many wonderful movies, What the Health, Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, and more. My word. Okay, let's get to kind of the heart and soul of what we're talking about today. This is woohoo. Let me share my screen, your new cookbook. Folks, this is what it looks like on Amazon, plant-based on a budget, quick and easy, 100 fast, healthy meal prep, freezer-friendly, and one-pot vegan recipes. This is on Kindle as well as a regular book. And of course, you can hit it up at Amazon. You see that here on your screen. People listening on audio, you know how to use Amazon, you know how to use Kindle. So do yourself a favor. Let's get into some of your favorite tips. Maybe I'll start with the very beginning of the book, which is your tip on start where you are.
I started plant-based on a budget with very modest means. I didn't have a lot of I didn't have a well-stocked kitchen. I had hand-me-downs that my parents used for maybe 20 years before they gave them to me. It took me 5 minutes to cut a tomato with my knife, but I was able to make it work. And you have to use what you have available and not allow the limited resources prevent you from taking control of your life and how you treat others, like the animals and the environment. So I used what I had and encourage people to do the same. Now, if you have a budget to invest, I do suggest heading over to Amazon or Marshalls or Home Goods and picking up a good quality knife, because that does make a difference. And you can find a good one for $10. I also like a nice pot or pan with a lid. I remember when I had no power pan with a lid. I would use a pot, and then I would put a pan on top of it to capture the moisture and steam my rice. So again, you can use what you have, but if you do have it within your budget, I suggest those things to start.
Mm-hmm. I hope it's okay. I'm going to be the amateur voice because I love to cook. I cook all the time. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so while I don't have a cookbook, I'm going to chime in with my own 2 cents, and you can tell me like, no, that's wrong. Or you can tell me if it's something that you do as well. For me, a lot of this is clutter your mind, like declutter your mind. So get rid of any thought like I can't, or I don't have it, or it's not possible, or like whatever. This is your health we're talking about. If you want to save money, save it on doing this stuff now so that you can save on healthcare costs later. So I love what you say. Start where you are. For me, it was a sharp knife. Then I went to Cuisinart. Ooh, that sounds so expensive, which is why I got mine refurbished on Amazon. And my Cuisinart, which I've had now for 7 years, was like $49. It was a secondhand Cuisinart, and I use it all the time. So, these kind of like cheap tricks, which is also a band from the 70s. But I also, whenever someone says, I'm in my 50s now, so like, do I need another thing for my birthday? I do not. Oh gosh, but if this is your situation and somebody says like, oh, it's your birthday, what can I do? Maybe that's your opportunity to ask for the blender you've always wanted or the cutting board you should have.
I love that you say your mindset, because it's actually one of the first ways to start saving money. And I think about my dad, George Okamoto, and I always tell people, channel your inner George Okamoto, because when I was younger, he would be at the register having them do a price check, rifling through coupons to save money for his family so that we could continue to have a better life than he did. And the line would be 5 people deep. People are tapping their foot, and my dad would say, they don't pay my bills. I'm never going to see them again. And so while I was embarrassed, as a child, I now understand that that is so true. And I've been able to save a ton of money with those price checks, with coupons, and I'm never going to think about those people again.
Yeah. I love what you say. And this, I have a feeling this podcast could go on for 3 hours. Neither you nor I have the time today. So we might have to do part 2, because I always talk about business, but actually I just really love to cook. So I would hearken that back to my experience about shutting down my own voice because other people had really kind of mocked me until I stopped talking about it. It's your health. Never let your voice take the back seat. So if that means people are waiting in line while you figure out the right price so that you can get beans on sale, then so be it. Let's move on to time is money. Oh, ain't it the truth? Tell us what you mean here.
Time is our most valuable asset. There's so much that we can be doing. We can be focusing on our businesses, but we could also be walking our dogs or hanging out with our family, or the many other things that bring us happiness and help us recover from those tough things that we do all day at work. And I like to be in and out of the kitchen. And there are so many ways that you don't have to sacrifice the taste and the nourishment that come with food, and still allow you to enjoy your meal without spending the time in the kitchen.
100%. Maybe we can talk about some tips and tricks here. I always feel like if you're cooking, then cook. So if you're cooking for, let's say, my favorite is to cook on Sunday afternoon, and I just block out 2 or 3 hours and I pretty much cook for the week. So whatever I'm making, I make enough to have 2 or 3 servings. So I can freeze one, I can have one on Monday night, and I can have one on Friday, and then one's in the freezer. So already I've cooked on Sunday night for Monday and Friday, and then I chop all these vegetables and I've got everything in containers. So when I go to make a bowl on Wednesday night, because I don't have that meal done yet, all I have to do is make rice and everything's already chopped for me. It's like my own little assembly line. And then I just put it together. So the time that you invest early on saves you time later. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I definitely do that. And another thing that I like to suggest is that it doesn't have to be complicated. You can
Mm.
think about meals that are going to take 15 minutes to throw together. Maybe you have whole wheat tortillas, a can of beans, some salsa, and the thing that you batch cook for the week is quinoa or rice. And that comes together on a weeknight in 10 minutes and is filling and tasty.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the bowl. We see this here on the cover of the book, Plant-Based on a Budget, Quick and Easy. And there's lots of pictures. So it's really a beautiful book as well as like the tips and tricks you need, but it's also a very pretty book. So you see this though right on the cover, this power of the bowl that just requires assembly if you give it a little bit of time up front. And I think that time that you spend in the beginning, a lot of people say like, I don't have 3 hours. But 3 hours on a Sunday is better than like an hour each night for 7 nights.
Or shopping impulsively because you've done that
Oh.
work early on in the week. When it gets more exhausting by Thursday, Friday, you're not likely to put in that effort if you haven't had a plan in place. And you might be more tempted to go to Chipotle and get a veggie burrito or stop at your favorite restaurant. And that really adds up.
Hmm. I love what you say here. And it's such a simple statement, but it is rife with implications. So Chipotle adds up, really expensive, as you said. Even the Chipotle bean burrito, which I love, by the way, high in sodium, all these sorts of things. So you always, no matter even the healthiest meal, like last night I had kale salad out in a restaurant and it was so delicious and I was so glad I did it. But I was like, oh, this dressing has so much more oil than I would ever do. So, you do yourself such a favor when you cook at home from the health perspective. And then there's a real savings. Correct me if I'm not putting this in the right words, but there's a real savings in time and in money and in energy. So I feel that if I don't eat right, by the end of the week, I'm more tired than I would
Mhm.
be had I cooked for myself a healthy meal starting on Sunday night.
Yes, I agree. I agree. When I'm not eating healthy food and a diversity of plants, I can
Mm.
feel that, especially in my tummy.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, but maybe help me with this one. My very favorite thing to do is open the refrigerator and say, my challenge today, should I choose to accept it, what's going bad? And I will make something with that because I don't like to waste anything ever. And I like the challenge of creativity on the spot. Cooking is my form of meditation. It's very zen for me. I love to chop. It's just this repetitive motion that's just really what my mind needs. So I wondered, you talk about having a plan and really kind of having the week mapped out, but does that take away some of the joy of cooking?
What I have found with a lot of my audience is that they're so busy. They have
Yeah.
children in sports, they have sometimes multiple jobs, and as much as they love cooking, weeknights begin to be a challenge, especially toward the end of the week when they are exhausted and when they just need a break. And so I'm looking to get them in and out of the kitchen and to not have to feel like fast food is the better option for their family, and to
Mhm.
realize that not only is it better for their health, but it's also better for their wallets. We tend to think that stopping through the drive-throughs $1 menu is going to be economical. It's actually really incredibly expensive when you add it up. I know that I can eat 3 things off of the dollar menu easily. So, it's going to be better for me to invest that in a $5 pot of chili that's gonna last me 5, 6, 7 meals. And with chili, I can really change it up throughout the work week. One day I can put it over sweet
Mm.
potatoes. One day I can eat it with some cornbread and have a different dining experience. And it's just overall better for me.
Oh my gosh. This, like, to me, this is like mind blowing, that you can take chili. Of course, this is what we're telling people. There's creativity even in this. Take chili and put it over sweet potatoes. Why had I not thought of that? Why have I
I love
not done that yet?
I am one of those people who does not like to eat the same exact thing every day. So, what I tend to do is make something that's more bland on the first day and then ladle it into a separate bowl each time I eat it with extra veggies and extra spices. So, if I'm doing a split pea soup Day 1, I'll eat it as a split pea soup. Day 2, I'll eat it with some lemon juice and some sriracha in there. Maybe I'll mix in some chickpeas for extra texture. And then the next day I'll serve it over brown rice with some chopped onion on top and just make it different. Maybe add in some nutritional yeast for a cheesy flavor or some hickory smoke for smoky flavor. You can do so much with it so that you don't hate split pea soup by the end of the week.
Yeah. I love this, but it gets us really to our next point is you have to have enough tools in the toolbox. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you have an empty fridge and you have an empty pantry, then each time you have to go to the grocery store and you're kind of starting from ground zero and it's more time. If you stock up with the basics, so it's a little bit of money and time, a bigger shop and a bigger spend. The first time, you make sure you're always going to have your favorite kind of sriracha handy. You're always going to have 3-4 cans of beans, and for our house, it's 3-4 cans of red beans, 3-4 cans of black beans, 3-4 cans of chickpeas, right? Because beans, right? Beans, legumes, like, oh my word. And then you can always add it in as this extra protein, this different taste, this different color. These things add value to one's sense of creativity and diversity. So if you can stock yourself with some of the good basics, maybe we can talk about that. What do you recommend people have in their cupboards?
I like to keep my pantry stocked with both dried beans and canned beans. I love dried beans. I know they take a little bit of time, but cooking them in the pressure cooker is 1 hour. You don't even have to soak them overnight. And the texture is so good. You can control the sodium and add in some things like onion and garlic or jalapeno. And so you can get really creative with it. So I like to do beans, rice, quinoa, split peas, lentils, of course. For my bulk, I always have those. And then I have cans of tomato sauce. I have Better Than Bouillon. I have cans of corn, chopped tomatoes, and lots of canned beans. And then in my freezer, I have a ton of things because sometimes I'll get back from vacation and I won't have time to go to the grocery store. Maybe I get home late. I want to still be able to make a filling meal without having to put a lot of effort and without having to go to the grocery store. So I keep a lot stocked in my freezer, like frozen broccoli or mixed veggies or some bell pepper mixes, and have things to throw together, at least a stir fry or a burrito.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say this. I do the same, though. Like I was saying before, if I'm cooking, then I'm there cooking. So if I'm making, plant-based lasagna, make it for 8 rather than 4, or make it for 12 rather than 6, or, and then I can put it in my freezer. But what I do is I cut it up in individual pieces. So if, I were to freeze, like if I make 2 lasagnas and I freeze one of them, then I have to take the whole lasagna out later. So I take that second lasagna and I chop it into 6 pieces or whatever, 4, 8 pieces, whatever it is. And then I individually wrap them so that I have like dinner already made and I might not use it for 2 months.
I love that. I am a big freezer fan. I tried to put in my cookbook as many recipes. In my cookbook, I tried to include as many freezer directions as possible. And I also try to include as many pressure cooker and air fryer conversions, just in case people have those things and want to save on time or are trying to eat less oil, they can use those instead.
I was going to ask you about your perspective on an air fryer. I often find like I could use an air fryer, but I often use my little toaster oven that I've had for like 20 years that has a convection flip. So I just use that and I make my own homemade bacon all the time with my go-to staple product, which is like containers and containers and containers of tofu, and then backed up by some tempeh, because that's a great backup, and some seitan if I don't have time to make seitan myself, which I should, but I don't. But tofu, just I can make it sweet, I can make it savory. I have tofu every morning for breakfast.
I love that. My husband is a big tofu tempeh fan.
And a sweet potato fan. We know this because her husband is Paul Shapiro, and he's been on this show many times. And he talks about like walking around the office eating sweet potatoes.
Also, he's flying right now, and he said his neighbor on the flight had a package of just basically steamed sweet potatoes and shared one with him. And it was the best possible neighbor he could have on a flight.
I love that. I was going to say, did he like reach over the aisle and like, hey, dude, can I have some sweet potato? Oh, men who bond over sweet potatoes. I love it. Okay. I will say in our cupboard, we always have spices. So, I would tell everybody, I hope this isn't annoying, Toni. So you just,
No,
you're the one with the
love it.
cookbook, but I'll say like the amateur voice here. I always have sweet paprika, cumin, and soy sauce and or Bragg's. And that is my go-to to make anything taste like meat. So if I cut up seitan or I cut up TV or, TVP, texturized vectorized protein, or tofu or tempeh, whatever it is, and then I take those chunks and I mix them in my melange of soy sauce, cumin, and paprika. And then I air fry it or put it in the convection oven, whatever I do. And it tastes like meat. So I do that all the time and really rely on it.
That's awesome. And it sounds delicious. I'm ready for lunch, so I'm going to go to your house. But I find spices to be really helpful to have, but also expensive at the grocery store. So I wanted to share a couple tips.
Great.
If you are looking for something affordable, you can get some spice blends. Sometimes you'll find those for 50 cents, like a taco seasoning or Italian seasonings or different marinades. Often those are plant-based and 50 cents to $1. If you don't have a well-stocked kitchen and you're just getting started and you don't want to drop $5 here and $5 there, that is a good place to start. Also, if you go to places like Walmart or Dollar Tree, you can find spices for $1. And I guess at Dollar Tree it's now $1.25, but it is still very economical to buy a whole bottle of spices or spice for $1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, some people rely on spices more than others. Some just like go to their favorite Tabasco. Like Tabasco's their spice of choice. But whatever it is for you, that can also change up the flavor profile. I tend to lean a lot towards Mexican cuisine. It's what I know and love: avocados, beans, rice. But my partner really leans towards Asian cuisine, and he's great at making Asian dishes, Korean dishes. So we have these two sets of spices in the house, and it really does help. Okay. What are your top takeaways? I don't know, maybe we've missed some things, but I think we've given people a lot of tips of how to cut corners but what do you want to make sure people know about this book?
This book is for everybody. I had 100 recipe testers, many of whom were non-vegetarians, and I got their stamp of approval. And even the vegans who use my book and tested for me live with or dine with non-vegetarians, and we want to give people a really great experience and show that it's easy and accessible and affordable and delicious to eat plant-based. And that is what I try to accomplish with Plant-Based on a Budget, Quick and Easy.
So we didn't really talk about it yet, but maybe we'll shift now a little bit to business. This kind of took off for you because, Kip and the movie hit it, and your friends and family really loved what you were doing. They found it a necessary tool for them to get healthy. But once you felt like you were onto something, did you intentionally grow it, or has it always been organic? Or did you put together a business plan?
The very beginning, on the very first day I launched Plant-Based on a Budget, it was picked up by PCRM, and
Great.
they suggested it as a promising new resource for people who are on a budget. And it's interesting, I'm actually getting ready to fly there for to LA for a PCRM event. So I feel like full circle. I have been honored to be supported by them. But so I did have traction in the very beginning. I knew that people were budget conscious, and there wasn't a lot available for people who are on a very tight budget. And because I had the life experience and was sharing as I was going through my own financial difficulties, it gave me credibility in a way that other people and other resources didn't show online. And so doing that over a very long period of time helped me build a platform both on my blog and on social media, but now I have books and podcasts and meal plans and other resources available. And I think what has kept people the most interested is having a face that has overcome obstacles financially, like having someone they can see and hear who has been able to do it and who has faced not only financial and access obstacles, but whose family wasn't on board and who has ties to their cultural food. I grew up eating Mexican food, and it's very hard to tell your family when they cook for you, I'm now plant-based. So sharing these different experiences over a very long period of time has helped me grow and keep my audience wanting to know more.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned something here that I think is so critical to really a way to move through the world. And of course, our businesses are a way of moving through the world, is that being authentic, that personal story, that personal experience, that meaningful thread to you really comes through to others. And particularly for the influencer, would you consider yourself an influencer?
This is a touchy question because influencer is so broad right now. You can be a bathing suit model and be an influencer, or you can be a person who we know someone who literally spits on people and makes fart noises and considers themselves an influencer. And it it makes me feel like I am so not that,
You are
that
not
I
an
don't know
influencer.
that I don't know what to call myself. But I do think of myself as a podcaster and as an author. So usually if I'm in an Uber and they're like, "What do you do?" I say I'm an author or a podcaster.
Yeah, that is really awesome. Great to know. So basically, the social media followings have come organically, really by following
Yes.
the knowledge drop, which is what we do here in the Plant Based Business Hour, about how to eat healthy on a budget, how to bring plant based into your life, but not having to, spend the farm, so they say, and keeping it simple and manageable. I think that's the hard part for people about cooking in general. They feel like it is a part time job. And while it can be, some of these time saving tips, like we were talking about, couple hours, one day a week, sets you up for the week so that you have easy to grab healthy options already in place for you. I can see where this kind of helping people with life hacks would be knowledge everybody would want to have.
Thank you. I also wanted to mention that the other big part of, I guess, being an influencer is that it's important to start thinking of yourself as a business, or as your brand as a business, instead of creating what you want to create or what you feel like creating, knowing the pain points that your audience is facing and then addressing those and providing a solution that is not a solution that you think might work, but one that you survey your audience about and one that you test in many different ways. It is a big reason I grew, is because before I thought about this as my passion project that I do when I have some free time. And there would be times I did not produce content because I was busy with life. But once I started prioritizing my business and showing up consistently and asking my audience, how can I serve you? It really transformed the way I showed up, the content I created, the ways I diversified. And that is what I attribute the growth and success of Plant-Based on a Budget to.
So, who is your audience?
65% of people are meat eaters who are looking to incorporate more plant-based dishes into their rotations at dinner. A lot of people have come from their doctors, wanting them to cut back on the red meat specifically, but also they need to lower their cholesterol, they are pre-diabetic, or maybe they have type 2 diabetes, and it's time to make a lifestyle change. And then a lot of people have come from watching a documentary on Netflix, whether that's What the Health, or they just saw Forks Over Knives, or they just saw Game Changers or Seaspiracy. They want to know more, and I have developed a resource for them that really doesn't make them feel any shame or severe urgency. I'm here to help them where they are and to move them along gently so that it's not just a 1 month challenge. It's a lifelong change.
And lifelong changes are made in baby steps.
Yes.
It is a step-by-step process for all of us, no matter what the topic. I mean, here we're talking about changing diet, but there are other things as well. So, but boy, I will say changing your diet by small steps can impact your weight by small steps, can impact your happiness by small steps, can impact your energy levels, your depression, positivity, any of these mood swings, all of it. Without your health, it's really a central point. So it's a good thing to get under your belt, folks. Again, plantbasedonabudget.com, Plant Powered People podcast, and her blog. You'll find these things at plantbasedonabudget.com, as well as her book, Plant Based on a Budget, the original, and then Plant-Based Quick and Easy, 100 Fast and Healthy Meal Prep, Freezer Friendly, and One Pot Vegan Recipes. You do have other books. You have the Vegan Friendly Cookbook with Michelle Sen.
Kane.
Oh, Kane. Gosh, I'm not even pronouncing that right.
That's okay. It's a tough one.
Yeah. And then, so you are busy. And of course, all of your socials, plantbasedonabudget.com. Okay. As we kind of wrap up here, I love your tip for business folks, by the way, of make sure you know your audience and make sure you're really speaking to them and giving them what they want, not just what you'd love to have. That's a great business tip for our business listeners today. Okay. Do you have a favorite recipe in the book?
I've been loving that black bean chili, but I also love one called sopa de fideo. It's something I grew up eating. My grandma would make it. And when I eat it, it transports me back to my childhood and makes me feel comforted and loved. And I wanted to share that with my audience. It's so simple to make, but what it brings is a big giant hug.
Oh, isn't that the best? Yes. Food is so much more than nutritional nourishment. It's also emotional nourishment. Although I will say that we create new habits. I mean, I do have some, I remember taco nights. It was with meat as a kid growing up. And that was so fun because we got to assemble and I just loved that. And we were all participating. That's a question I want to ask you about that. So I remember it as this really tight family experience. But I also have new memories. I told you now that I have tofu every morning for breakfast and I take, a half a cup of raw oats, a slice of tofu, so it's like 1/5 of a container, a tablespoon of hemp seed, whatever berries I have in the refrigerator, I grab a fistful, I throw them in, and then, thank you, Dr. Greger, a tablespoon of date syrup, which is my tip from Dr. Greger. I mix it all together and then I eat it while I'm walking around the house, getting ready for my first business meeting. I mean, it is so fast. It's so easy to put together. It is so delicious. And it's got 17 grams of protein or something. I mean, I'm not worried about protein, but just saying and people always say to me, you eat tofu for breakfast? And now I say to them, yes, I'm emotionally dependent on my tofu for breakfast.
And another thing that's pretty cool is that when you become plant-based, you don't have to give up taco night. You can do simple swaps. My favorite way to get my meat-loving family to love my tacos is using lentils instead of ground beef and cooking those up and serving them in the same way I would that ground beef. I would use the same seasonings. I would saute them with some bell pepper or some onion and garlic and give that same flavor and also texture. Then they're going to put it together with the same toppings and it's going to have a familiar experience that they won't think twice about the lentils.
Yeah, I totally dig this. When my niece and nephew came over, and they're still at the age where they're yes, I totally want plant-based. Everyone's talking about it, but I've never really had it before. I don't really know. This was 5 or 6 years ago. Now they're totally, on board. And I was like, oh, dude, come over to my house. I will make you plant-based gyros and you will not know the difference. And they didn't. Same thing. I mean, I just seitan and I spiced it up and I served it onions and tomato and plant-based cream cheese or sour cream. And, yeah, it's all doable. That's a great takeaway. I'd love for people to know from this kind of aberrational plant-based business hours. We talk so much about cooking, but I'd love for people to know whatever you eat, it can be made plant-based and just you won't know the difference, except your heart will know. And your cells will know as they begin to filter out the blood from the bloodstream. Your body will know. This is awesome. Okay, so let me ask you some of the questions I always ask as I end the podcast. I used to ask this question for like 10 years out, but the world is so topsy-turvy and things are changing so much. What are your predictions for the next 3 years in terms of how many people will go plant-based or try plant-based? Or what do you see in terms of short-term projections?
I am very inspired that people will continue embracing plant-based living. And I have now 16 years of experience, and way back then, people were not supportive. They didn't know how to pronounce it. And in the last 3 years, I feel like the biggest indicator that I've seen personally is that my parents, the ones I mentioned earlier, who were very hardcore upset about my choice to not eat red meat, are now, I've heard them with my own ears saying, oh, well, my daughter has been vegan for a long time. So like they're proudly exclaiming that I'm vegan. And I'm so touched. I'm so grateful that I have their support, but it wasn't always that way. And it must be telling that this is the future.
Yeah, I love that sort of like hashtag proud parent, hashtag vegan proud parent. Just so awesome. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
I wish 10 years ago that I knew that this would be my life. I wish I knew then, when I was trying to figure out what would earn me money that would make me happy. I sometimes feel like it's easy to let go of our dreams and our passions for the sake of being comfortable, having to not worry about your rent or where your food comes from. At that time, I thought that I was going to either have to sacrifice working in a nonprofit, not getting paid well, to live my passion, or that I would have to go to a job I didn't love, that was not my passion, to earn to give. And now I know that I'm able to use business for a source of good in the world and give back on a daily basis in something that also fuels my heart.
Yeah, how inspiring. I think that's dreamy. I think that's really what everyone shoots for, is to take their passion and make it something they can do every day and feel like they're making a difference in the world while they grow their business and help people. It is indeed dreamy. Okay, you are running around and it's not a dreamy day and things aren't going the way that you would like. What's the one phrase you tell yourself to get yourself back in the groove?
I learned this from a friend of mine when I was going through a really hard time. And I had always heard this too shall pass in the worst of times. But I heard it in the best of times and the worst of times, this too shall pass. And what that did for me was help me really savor good parts of life, really soak them in, be present, so that when life gets hard, I know that those good times will come back. I can relive them in my brain, hold on to them, know that they'll come again and get me through whatever I'm experiencing that may be bringing me down.
That is by far the best explanation of this too shall pass I've ever had on this show. So I do get this too shall pass 10% of the time. It is sort of a common one, but never in the good times. And that's a really, really good reminder. I think really what it tells you is just how volatile and uncertain life is. And you just have to be ready to ride those waves, the ups and the downs. Thank you for that. Kind of cheating because you are such an expert here, but you're running around, you don't have time for lunch. You accidentally, how could this be, folks? You accidentally don't have a meal planned and you don't have oddly something in your fridge. Let's say you're at an airport. What is your go-to snack?
My go-to snack, if I'm bringing it or if I'm buying?
You choose. What is your go-to snack if you didn't really sit down and cook for yourself because your day didn't allow?
I love citrus fruits. Right now it's Sumo citrus time. I'm not sure if you've ever had one of those, but they are so delicious. They're not the most affordable citrus, but I carry multiple of them with me in my bag, and I'm getting ready to go to the airport right now. So I am going to pack a few of those and rely on them for the duration of my flight.
Tell me again what it is.
Sumo Citrus.
Sumo
And
citrus. Okay.
they are very juicy, sweet with just a tad bit of tartness. And when you're peeling them, the peel comes right off. It just falls off.
Great. Okay. Got my marching orders. Sumo citrus. Usually that's where I end the podcast, but not with you. With you, I'm going to say, what is your favorite tool? The one everyone's got to have in the kitchen?
Instant Pot. I was very slow to come to the Instant Pot. I thought it was too expensive. And like you, I got mine on Amazon in the used section. It has a dent in it. I saved $30. It's only cosmetic, so it doesn't affect the functionality at all. But what I like about it is that it helps me be more inspired to use dried staples like lentils, because you can have lentils in 8 minutes, quinoa in 5 minutes. You can even put together a soup or a stew or a chili in 3 to 5 minutes. So highly recommend. You can saute. And if you're on a budget and you're taking the family on a road trip, getting a hotel at Disneyland, you can bring that with you. And it also has a saute function so that if you wanted to do a tofu scramble in the morning, you don't have to pressure cook it. You can just use a saute function and make a whole meal for your family for $5-10.
Oh my God, have hot pot will travel. I love that. That is so awesome. I'll just say another little tip for those who like to kick it spicy. In our house, when we make dried beans, which we do, we throw in a chipotle pepper. Ooh, it's very good. It's very good. I will say this would maybe be a shocker for everybody, but my go-to tool in the kitchen that everybody must have is a scissors. I use scissors so much that I never think I will. I always think a knife will do the function, and it's really a scissors that I want more often than not. So, everyone's got a scissors lying around, folks. I know you can do that one. I want to thank Toni for being with me and for sharing her joy and passion and expertise and knowledge, and for giving everyone so much knowledge. It's what we do on the show. It's a knowledge drop. So be sure to go to plantbasedonabudget.com. Check out her book. That's on Amazon, people. Come on, go get it. It is on Amazon Kindle as well as hard copy. It is a beautiful book if you want the hard copy, but Kindle as well if you just want it on the go and for travel. Of course, she does have a blog, and she does have the Tongue Twister of Plant Powered People podcast. So you can check that out as well. It's been a joy, Toni, to have you on my podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Toni, you don't go anywhere, but everybody else on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, I will see you all next week. Bye, everybody. Toni, stay put.